All right, all right. Welcome to Your Scary Stories. We already have some people filing in, some comments coming in. One from TikTok, Wrestling Soap Opera. I thought the show was at 10:30.
It's partly my fault. The dog had to go out and held us up a bit.
Crazy thing is, he actually doesn't have a dog.
I do. He's a golden doodle.
That's the part that I really can't get over.
He's the scariest part. He's a real big puppy, and if I post a picture, we'll probably get more followers. So
Someone said, I thought Luke was searching for a fan to blow onto the microphone for the show.
no, but 2 seconds before the thing came on, we ran and turned off the air conditioner.
That is so great. Somebody said that. Oh, man. You're using an air conditioner in the winter? Man, people are all over you guys. People are all over you. Everything you say is now being critiqued.
It's a heat pump, so it does both air conditioning and heating, depending on what you want it to do. So it sounds an air conditioner because it looks like one.
It sounds like a noisy fan all the time. So
could have said the furnace.
Yeah.
What fun would that have been? All right, so let's get going here. We've got several people watching live, so we don't want to let them down. This is Your Scary Stories Live, the podcast, the show where we share your scary stories or various other scary stories across the internet. And last week, Jackie Moon shared this story about these stairs in the woods that magically randomly show up in the woods. So I was so intrigued by this story that I went out and I was talking to them the whole time. I looked and I looked and I read and I read and I was just so intrigued by it. And I found a story about what happened to an individual that stepped on, or what, I guess, a domino effect of things that happened when an individual stepped on these stairs in the woods. And like a search and rescue guy, I believe Jack was who sparked this story that made me keep researching. That was your story, right? A search and rescue guy?
Yeah, it was a search and rescue guy. He had a few stories. We may revisit his stories in the future, but
this story, again, is about what happens if you step on those creepy stairs in the woods. And you guys, I'm going to go ahead and get it going. We got people waiting. We're a little behind, so we'll go ahead and take off here. And this is going to be told in kind of I'm going to be reading from the individual that shared this story. So, okay, so me and my friend Sam went to Michigan together on a hiking trip. When you pull up, you see a lodge. When you hike to the campsite, it's a very woodsy part of Michigan. The trail is like 10 feet wide, and then around you is pretty much all woods. There are park guides that take you to the lodge to the campsite. You're allowed to spread out because everyone is on the same trail, but everybody's within a couple miles of each other. That's how the size of this is. There's always a park ranger following along, sometimes in the distance because of the size of the park and the amount of people. We're technically with a lot of people, but it's just me and Sam. The lining of the trees on the side of the trail are like really, really dense. You couldn't see a deer if it was 10 feet in front of you. I look off to the right and there's a gap in the trees. I see a staircase 100 yards into the woods. It sticks out completely. It's so out of place. It looks like it got plucked up with a mansion. It looks like something you were building, like a Sims house. You chose this staircase, but then you put the staircase there, then you deleted the rest of the house. But at the top, it just stopped. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's like 10 feet high, then nothing, which is so weird. Sam and I look at each other. We didn't see the park ranger around, but we decided, hey, let's go check these stairs out. So we started walking towards it, and the closer we get to it, the more eerie things start to feel. I started to get the feeling that this isn't like your local forest preserve. We're in the middle of deep woods, like we're on a long nature adventure or something. Then you see something so clearly man-made out here, it sticks out, it's weird. Why is it here? The stairs were glowing as if it's trying to attract me. I started getting intrusive thoughts. Everything in my head is saying, go up these stairs. I run up and just hop on the first step. I have my hand on the railing and both of my feet on the first step. This is where things start to get weird. The second I got onto it, it almost felt like it had a light little vibration to it. I felt it on my feet, this vibrating, and on my hands, they were tingling a bit. I'm like laughing and giggling like, oh, this is really weird. While I'm inspecting the staircase, it has carpet on the stairs. The railings are white. The carpets are blue, like a royal blue. And there's no debris. There's not a leaf, not a sprinkle of dirt, not any bugs or leaves or anything on it. Strange. It's almost starts to feel like a trap. Part of my head is saying, keep going to the top. And then before I climb to the top of the stairs, I look back at my friend Sam. He's looking at me like he's horrified. He's looking at me like something is wrong with me. Like I'm clearly in distress. Then I look back at the top and I'm thinking, should I go to the top? Sam then grabs me by the hood and he yanks me off the stairs really, really hard. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground laying face up. He immediately comes up to me and says, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, dude, why did you pull me so hard?" He asked me again, "Are you sure you're okay?" I replied, "What are you talking about?" And this is when the conversation turned weird. I thought I was on there giggling and having a good time, and he told me it seemed like I was actually standing there having a standing seizure. I don't remember that because my perspective is I was laughing and the staircase is vibrating, and I'm having a decent time just really trying to figure out what it is because we have this immaculate staircase in the middle of the woods. And he says my eyes are actually rolling to the back of my head and I'm having a seizure. So he yanked me off as soon as he started to realize that I was having a seizure. He said no more than a few seconds passed. Honestly, I felt completely fine, no type of side effect or whatever. He helped me to my feet and asked if I'm okay to walk and if he needed to go get help. And I told him I'm fine and absolutely do not need help. And let's get out of here. We hustled back to the trail and nobody's around. It's all good. We talked about it for a little bit, but I have to convince him that I'm actually fine to continue on and head back to the campsite. We finished up the hike, and when we got back to the campsite, everybody's there. It's all good. Nobody noticed anything or saw anything. Nothing dispersing going on. There's food being made. It's been a long hike. Everybody's tired. While we're finishing up eating and everybody else is dispersing, I see the park ranger looking at me with concern. I was debating with Sam if I should tell the ranger what happened. Sam thought I should tell him, but honestly, I felt too embarrassed. Sam goes up to the tent and I decided to go to the bathroom before heading to the tent. After using the bathroom and on my way to the tent, the park ranger stops me. He kind of looks pissed off. He looks me in the face, looks me right in the eyes, and he says, "Please tell me you didn't touch the stairs." He repeats it again. "Please tell me you didn't touch those stairs." I told him I didn't break anything and I didn't mess with them because I'm thinking maybe they are like a national landmark or something important. He said, "It's not about the stairs. I don't care that you damaged them. Did anything happen to you?" I started to think he was concerned about my health. I tried to downplay it and I told him, my body threw a little bit of a fit, my friend said, but I'm fine now. I'm fine. Because I'm thinking he's wondering, do I have this guy who's a liability on my campsite? He seems upset that I'm okay. He then tells me if something didn't happen to you, something's going to happen to someone else. I thought, that's weird. That's not where I thought he was going to take this. He starts guilting me, telling me there are women and children here. So if something didn't happen to you, something might happen to them. I can tell by the way this guy is talking that he is absolutely positive that something horrible is going to happen because I touched the stairs.
I started pressing him because I'm wondering why you acting like the stairs are so ominous. I started asking, why would you take us on this hike by this dangerous staircase? He explains a little bit, kind of like I should be in the know about these stairs. He starts saying stuff like they pop up randomly and suddenly. I'm thinking this guy is absolutely tripping. He's making things up. He's trying to talk to me about touching this random staircase, make it seem like something horrible is going to happen. I leave this weirdo by himself because I'm going to go to bed. I want to try to enjoy this trip for the rest of the time we're here. The next day, we have a great time. The campsite's got a great lake. We're spending time in the water. Nothing weird is happening. Everything's completely okay. In my head, that guy was tripping. He's super weird. We're fine. By the end of the day, I had completely forgotten about what happened. Sam's over it, and we go to sleep because obviously when you're camping, you're spending so much time and energy outside. You're exhausted. So we hit the hay. It's early the next morning when we hear something outside our tent. Maybe around 4 a.m. The sun's about an hour from coming up. We hear this ruckus sound outside, someone crying. We take a look, and it's this young boy. We're like, what's going on here? We all got out of our tents, and there's already people around him. From what we could hear from people talking, his mom is gone, his tent is gone, and all their belongings are gone. They start questioning this kid, and they're like, where's your mom? This little kid just points towards the trees. Apparently, this kid's mom packed up all their stuff, went out on her own hike in the middle of the night. I'm thinking this is, mom of the year material here. Why would someone do that? We formed a search party. Everybody's coming together like, all right, we're going to go look for this lady. As we're walking towards the big group that's going on the search, the park ranger walks by me and Sam, and he says some slick comment to me saying, you better hope we find her, because if we don't, it's on you. At this point, I'm pretty pissed, because this strange guy, this really weird guy, is telling me about these mythical stairs, and now he's trying to blame me for this mom packing up her stuff and leaving in the middle of the night. Sam asks, why would he say something like that to you? Which I get his confusion. Why would somebody blame somebody for getting up and leaving in the middle of the night on me? So I filled him in on the mythology of these staircases this park ranger had told me. Sam's face is expressing to me that he believes the ranger and not me. I was being a little sarcastic about it, but Sam seemed pretty serious. He tells me, I think we should probably check by the stairs. So luckily, the search party is kind of directed towards the area anyways, because we don't think this lady's going to go very far off the trail. And so they're like, all right, maybe she went back to the lodge. Maybe she was done with the campsite. There's no sign of her. We didn't see anything at first. We're walking down the trail that we came in. But once we get to the clearing, this lady is sitting cross-legged exactly where the stairs were. At this point, I'm a little freaked out. But I'm also like, of course she's sitting there. Like, is she in on this as well? Like, what's going on here? Why is this lady sitting cross-legged exactly where the stairs were, and the stairs aren't there anymore? Then my mind starts going, like, why am I in this weird situation? Where is this weird park ranger? Are they in cahoots with each other? Is something deranged going on? Is this person crazy? Me and Sam jog up to her. There's already people next to her by this point, and as we're approaching her, I see that her clothes are tattered. Mind you, she's only been gone like an hour and a half tops, and her clothes are all tattered. She looks like she got dragged through the forest. She looks like Bear Grylls after a week in Siberia by himself eating earthworms. She looks sleep deprived. She looks like she hasn't had food or water in a while. Her eyes are giving like a psychosis kind of look to it. We get up to her and people are already asking her questions. One lady's like, what happened? Are you okay? And she's just rocking back and forth. She says, what took you guys so long? And the guide that's there, he says, don't worry, it's only been like an hour. You need something to drink and you're safe now. And she just starts mumbling, it's been days. It's been days. Right then I thought, okay, is she crazy? They're still questioning her, but she's not even answering their questions at this point. She's just kind of talking and mumbling to herself. I caught a few sentences as she mumbled out. It told me you'd come. It told me I'd be safe by the stairs. Are you kidding me? It told me you'd come. It told me I'd be safe by the stairs. The stairs aren't even here. How does she even know that there were stairs here? At this point, I'm starting to believe the park ranger. I start to feel guilty about this. Am I the reason this woman is in this deranged fit, sitting here in this clearing? The reality of the situation is starting to hit me, and we get this lady up. We have to take her back to the campsite because we can't take her to the lodge. We can't take her to the hospital. We have to get back to the campsite where everyone else is, and that's where her kid is.
All right, so that's the end of part one. Let's unpack what we just went through here. So they went camping. Sam and his friend went camping in Michigan on a hiking trip, and not their first hike out into the woods. They see this staircase, perfectly pristine staircase. Some reason he feels like he needs to go touch the stairs. He's getting this feeling. It's attracting him. It seems to be glowing even. He runs up, steps on the first step. His friend Sam pulls him off. He's like, why the heck did you pull me off so hard? What's going on? He said, you're having a seizure. But to him, he just felt like he was almost having this outer body experience with his vibrations and just a weird sense of feeling. As they're going back the park ranger somehow, he tells the park ranger about this, and the park ranger is very upset that he stepped on the steps. And at first he's confused, thinking like, why is this guy so upset that I stepped on these steps? Like, is this a national landmark? Are these steps important? Are they significant? He says, I'm not worried about the steps. It's something didn't happen to you. Something happened to somebody else. As we get into part two of this story, as we got on the second part of part one, we discovered that the next morning, early morning, they found out, I think it was before the sunrise, that one of the campers there was missing. It was a child's mom was missing. They went into the woods, and this is where I don't want to mix it up, Jack. They found her where the steps were.
That's right.
But they weren't there now.
The steps are not there.
What was she saying? She was saying some weird things about this.
Yeah, it's just saying, it took forever to find her. It took several days to find her, even though it was only about an hour or so. She was saying that something told her to wait by the steps and that they'd be safe there. And she looked like, she was just been dragged around. And
been in the woods for days.
Been in the woods for days, ragged, tired, and hungry.
In reality, she's only been in the woods for a few hours at tops, and she wasn't actually that far into the woods, right?
No, not from where they were, because they had just gotten there from campsite.
So that's where we left off here. We'll get into part two here in a minute, but what's your guys' feelings here when you first read through part one of this?
I think that people are acting pretty rational, if you see some steps in the woods, you'd be very tempted to be like, well, I want to go get up on those steps. I want to check those out.
Unless you heard about this being a thing in multiple different places like we have before. And so, this does make sense for them to do this, as he said. And also, I feel like even the ranger, even though he's kind of scared of this happening, he wasn't too aggressive with how he handled the situation. He was just like, did you do this? Just tell me right now. That way we know what's going on next. And so I thought this is kind of like Jack said, pretty rational reactions by everybody so far.
You put yourself in the person's shoes that had this happen to him, though, and it probably seems like the ranger's acting a little bit odd that he's so worried about these stairs.
Yeah.
But the size of the woods and the amount of people there, the ranger couldn't be everywhere at once, so therefore he didn't able to stop that. But I guess that's something, do you bring that up beforehand, or is that actually going to make somebody step on the stairs,
Yeah, it would definitely, increase the temptation. But also, I do wonder, rather not wonder, but it does seem to line up with what most park rangers or search and rescue teams say is just kind of leave the stairs alone. They don't really get into it too much. So,
and we're going to dive back into the story here. Luke's going to pick things back up. Luke, are you ready?
We get this lady up. We start talking, walking her back. Sam and I are a little bit ahead of the three others that had found her. As we're walking back, she's just rambling to herself in a really light voice, saying, it said this, it said that. People who were with her were just trying to console her. They were saying, hey, it's going to be okay. Your son's at the campsite. A really light voice, she says, son? Everybody's being very gentle with her. She's been through a lot, so nobody's thinking, oh, she doesn't know who her son is. At this point, the lady doesn't even know her own name. Her eyes are absolutely deranged. One of the group says, yes, your son. She just stares and says, what's his name? Oh, your son, his name is Nick. He's just giving her the answers that she needs to get back to reality. So he's doing a great job consoling her. As we're walking back, the guilt in me is rising. And all I could think about is how much I want to apologize to this park ranger being kind of disrespectful earlier. I was brushing him off about everything he said would happen. It's a long walk. I have a lot of time to think about what I'm going to say to him. Right when I see him, he sees the woman. And I swear to God, this man exhales for the first time since I met him. He is so relieved that she's alive. I walked right up to him and I just started apologizing. Tell him I fully believe him. I'm sorry I did this. That's what I can do to help. He just kind of apologized for being hard on me. As he's walking away, he says, I just needed you to know how serious this situation is. Sorry for taking it out on you. I just hate finding dead kids. That hit me like a bomb because he knew something horrible was going to happen. He didn't know if it was going to be an adult or a kid. He said it as if it's happened before and that he's had to find kids like that. And the idea of finding a kid in the same state that she's in was absolutely heartbreaking. So at this point, We're trying to get this lady better before her kid comes back from the excursion that they all went on. We clean her up, get her food and water, and get her some new clothes, trying to get her back to normal, so the kid doesn't come back and see his mom in this horrible state. Afterwards, we're just sitting around the campsite. She's all cleaned up and looking a bit better. She's just sitting there with her hands folded in her lap and her knees touching each other, just sitting very delicately. She kind of just looking around, still very spacey. She's not talking to anybody. She's mumbling to herself a little bit, but she seems a little bit more put together, a little bit more calm. She's pretty happy that she's back at the campsite as the kids are coming back. The entire group is kind of expecting this big reunion moment. Everyone's expecting a warm embrace. We're all happy. Everything's okay, and when the kids come back, the son walks up at the end of the campsite, and everybody's looking at her, and everybody kind of goes silent for this embrace. She looks up, and she kind of sees that everybody's looking at her. It's almost like she took it as a cue. And she scans the kids and says, "Nick?" just really gently. We look at the kid, and the kid's scowling at his mom, like he's looking at a stranger that he doesn't like. He gestures kind of like a shrug, and then she stops scanning kids, and she locks in on him. She almost stands up like a machine, just very robotically, no wasted movements. And she lifts her hand slightly as if she's inviting him to come give her a hug instead of coming to give him a hug. The kid starts backing up. He starts crying. She says, "That's not my mom anymore. I want my dad," and he runs off. And I look around the group. It feels so awkward and tense. Moments didn't unfold how we were expecting. And everybody has this kind of sadness on their face. And I look and I see the park ranger's face, and he's looking at the woman like this. His world is being torn apart. He's more anxious than I've seen this entire time. And the woman at the campsite immediately go up to the mom, trying to console her. Tell her that the kids react to trauma in different ways. He'll get over it, and it's going to be okay. Her face is expressionless, as if she's not even hearing these women, and just looking right past them. And her eyes are just following the kid. Everyone else in the campsite starts dispersing, because it's a very tense moment. Except for the park ranger. I see him talking to the camp guide. I sneak behind to eavesdrop a little bit, see what he's saying. And he's telling the camp guide to call the father. Tell him to come pick them both up tomorrow. I can kind of tell that the camp guy is not in the know because the way he's saying it to him. He's saying she doesn't seem fit to drive. He's talking as if he's not aware of the gravity of the situation. The camp guide says yes and walks off. I'm still standing behind him, and he just barks out, "Come here." And it's one of those moments when you're sitting in the back of class messing around, and your teacher's writing on the whiteboard, and they call out your name without even looking at you. Sent chills down my spine.
I just immediately walk up to the ranger and say, "What do you want me to do? I'm in full soldier mode at this point in time because this is my fault. I want to help. I want to fix things." He starts speaking to me very firmly. His eyes are completely locked in on the mom. He's not even looking at me. He then says, "I'll keep my eyes on her. You take care of the kid. The father can't get here until tomorrow. By no means does she interact with this kid until he gets here. Do you understand me?" He doesn't want to lie to this kid. He has to entertain him. Mind you, he's been working with kids forever. So then he says, "At this point, I know that I had to build up a comfortable relationship with the kid," which I wasn't worried about. When I get to Nick, he's playing bags with himself off to the side. I just walk up and I say, "Best 2 out of 3. I start cracking jokes. It's easy to make kids laugh. It's easy to make kids forget what's going on. We're having a pretty good time until one of the other kids walks up and put both of his hands over his face. "Are you going to cry again?" And starts laughing and runs off. I look at Nick and I ask, "What was that about?" And Nick says, "I told him who my mom left with last night." I asked, "Who did your mom leave with last night?" He told me he saw her holding hands with a man as she walked into the forest last night. "What did he look like?" And Nick just holds up his thumbs and rubs it and says his face looked like this. I have no clue what that means, so I immediately start asking follow-up questions. What color was his skin? What was he wearing? And Nick just goes, "He was completely pale." I said, did he have any distinguishing facial features? Like his eyebrows, were they bushy, bright eyes, big nose, anything like that? He told me he didn't have any of those at all. No features at all. I'm thinking, apparently there's some weirdo walking around in a mask, drawing women into the woods in the middle of the night. Inside, I'm freaking out, but I don't want Nick to see that. So I start reassuring him, letting him know that he's safe, and we're not going to let that man hurt you. He's not coming back. I want to keep distracting him and giving him a fun time, but I need to go report this back to Sam, so I make an excuse to go back to the tent. I give Sam a nod, signaling we need to talk. The second the tent zips closed and I'm about to start speaking about everything, all this new information I just learned about, Sam cuts me off. I go, I have so much to tell you. He said, me first. He has a guilty look on his face and says to me, I've been spying on her, and I know this is going to sound weird, really weird, but I was in the group with her. And you know, when people are in a group in that moment, when everybody starts laughing and then one person is left laughing when everybody else has stopped? Well, that happened. She was the last one laughing, and I looked at her, and for a split second, she was still laughing, but her mouth was closed and she wasn't moving at all. Nobody else saw it but me, and it irked me so bad. Haven't been able to stop watching this woman or make sure she's not been left alone for the rest of the day. I've been spying on her the entire time. I'll be honest, I wasn't fully sold on this idea. So I asked, okay, like, Sam, what has she been doing? He replied, when there's nobody around her, she sits motionless. And I'm not talking about relaxing. I'm talking about this woman is not moving at all. I said, what do you mean, if nobody's around? You've been following her around? He then holds up a pair of binoculars, and I could tell he was a little proud to show me of the commitment he had to do this spy work. And then he says, I've been watching her with these. I watched her for 30 minutes straight. She did not move. She did not blink. She was not breathing. She looked like an empty vessel. And then when somebody walks near her, she starts blinking. Then she forces out a weird smile. She starts looking around as if she's taking in nature. And then she starts fake breathing. Imagine a mime pretending like he's breathing and then holding back saying anything more. So I told him, bro, just spit it out. I can tell you have something more to say, as he went quiet. He explained, you know how she was saying it's telling her to do this, it's telling her to do that? I don't think it's it telling her to do anything. I think she is the it. I don't even get a fill in Sam about all the smooth-faced man stuff that Nick had told me before he says, we got to tell the ranger right now. I got up and followed. We walked up to the ranger, and Sam just starts pouring his heart out about all the evidence that he's found throughout the day. And the ranger was listening, patiently nodding. And then right when Sam finished, the ranger says, don't worry, boys. We're on the same page. There's no chance I'm letting that thing leave my park. There's no way I'm letting that thing leave my park? I'm thinking, did he just say that thing? Is she possessed? The ranger goes on. You guys have no idea how lucky we are that the kid doesn't trust her. It is critical, absolutely critical. We do not let it get out of the park. And the only way it can get out of the park is if it manipulates a loved one to escort it out of the park. We have to keep Nick away from her. We have to keep them completely separated until the dad gets here tomorrow morning. I already told the camp guide to send all the kids paddle boating for the remainder of the day, so it has no chance of talking to him. For the rest of the day, you need to monitor her, and then when that kid gets back before the sun goes down, you need to get him to his tent immediately. This is what we got to do. We'll be home free once the father gets here tomorrow morning. So before I even get to really digest any of this new information that's just been sent my way, me and Sam hustle back to the common area just to keep an eye on her to make sure she's not running off. When we get back there, we see she's not dormant anymore. She's a little bit more active today, and she's walking around the campsite asking different group of campers if they've seen her son. All the campers are still being nice and gentle with her because they kind of know what's happened. They're just telling her all the kids went paddle boating, it's fine, they'll be back later. But by the third time of her asking each group, you could tell and kind of see that the campers were getting a little bit annoyed and frustrated with her. She goes back up to this one group to ask them for the fourth or fifth time, and one burly country-looking dude kind of blurts out, kind of in a jokingly manner, that dad getting here tomorrow won't come soon enough, am I right? Then his wife or girlfriend hits him on the shoulder and told it, sorry, he's being rude, honey. Be patient. The morning will come very quickly. Then it starts repeating what the lady said as if it was taking in new information and formulating a new question to ask. It repeats itself 3 times. My husband's going to be here in the morning. My husband's going to be here in the morning. My husband's going to be here in the morning. And then she looks back at the group and asks, do you know what time my husband's going to be here in the morning? And they shook their heads no. She walked away, but a little bit more frantic this time. I don't really know how to explain it, but the only way I can explain it is that she turned more like to an active panic, as if she knows it's crunch time. She only has one day to convince this kid to take her home. She continues to walk group to group, just repeating herself. Do you know what time my husband's going to get here? Do you know what time my husband's going to get here? It literally walks around asking the same question, getting the same answers. So, just to recap, and the son's freaking out when he sees her. Completely, that's not my mom anymore. That is not my mom. They start looking into this more, they being the park ranger, him and his friend. They're all realizing how this thing is acting weird, almost like a demonic force in somebody's body, trying to figure out what's going on. Doesn't really know who her son is, doesn't know the situation, asking a lot of questions, trying to get answers. They've called the dad to come pick the boy up tomorrow, and they have a game plan to completely separate the two until the morning, because the park ranger's fear is this thing can leave the park only if it's able to manipulate a loved one to take it home. And then from there, we don't know what terrible things would happen.
Yeah, and the park ranger's like general attitude is like he's seen this before.
Yeah, he seems like this isn't crazy to him. Like it's like he's been in this situation before.
He's definitely seen a thing or two by this point, and it's kind of like...
It goes back to the same thing we talked about. These stairs in the woods, apparently this happens. These mysterious stairs in the woods, and they're dangerous. They're a dangerous force to be dealt with.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. The part where it's repeating itself over and over again, that's genuinely terrifying.
Yeah, but it's doing it again as if it needs to collect this and like it has to process it, figure out what to mimic and act and do next.
Right, because it's like just sitting there when no one's watching it, and
it's not doing anything.
Yeah, it's just kind of, it's just like whenever someone talks to it, it starts to just behave like they're behaving or something like that. It's just to pretend to be human, I guess.
Yeah, it's like not even breathing when nobody's near it. It's not even moving. It's not doing anything. Then as somebody comes nearby, it comes alive, and then like almost like it snaps into character or something. Jack, you want to pick the story back up here?
Okay. The sun starts coming down, and the kids start coming home from paddleboarding. We're coming up on dinner time, and everybody meets in the common area to eat. We can't just obviously keep a mom separate from her kid without other campers getting really suspicious, so me and Sam go meet with Nick before he re-enters the campsite, because we just want to avoid the situation entirely. If we just get through this part, we get him in his tent, and then we're home free. We got the kids safe, and we're all good. So we're just assuming that maybe it'll follow the herd, go get food like everyone else is getting food. We could just get Nick to his tent, and we'll be set. So I have Sam go make a couple plates of food for us while we escort Nick to his tent. But within a couple of minutes, while Sam was getting our food and I'm getting to the tent, it must have slipped away. Because when we get to Nick's tent, he unzips it. This thing that was, or it's just not his mom, immediately pops out and grabs him by the arms and says, "You're not going to leave without mommy." I wish I could say I did something heroic, but I just let out a little bit of a scream, and I double hand gripped Nick's string backpack because I don't want to risk touching this thing, and I swung him behind me really hard because I was trying to get him. I wasn't trying to get into like a tug of war with this thing. When I tell you in this moment I was mortified because I was the only thing in between her and Nick, I felt fight or flight gripping in. I had to remind myself that this isn't a woman, and if it takes a step forward, I'm not flying. I'm standing here. The only words I could get out were, "Are you good?" And then it just said, kind of softly and menacing, "We need alone time." don't make me scream. I bark at Nick to go get the ranger, because the only thing I want at this moment is an authority figure here. This isn't like me, but I have no idea what the thing is. So Nick books it, and I'm just kind of frozen there, staring at this thing, waiting for it to scream and make me look like maybe like a creep or something in front of the entire camp. But it just stands there for a few moments with its eyes staring around like it's searching for something in its head, almost as if it's trying to remember something. And just like that, its eyes lock onto me, and I brace myself because I think it's going to let out this horrific scream. I was expecting the scene that this thing is about to make when it finally explodes into a scream, but that's not what happens. I get a little confused and almost a little bit relieved, because in that moment I realized that this thing only mimics sounds. This thing has no gauge of human inflection or social cues, because the scream that it didn't match the situation. I was expecting it to scream in horror, as if it was accusing me of attacking her or something, but instead it screamed as if like a little girl was playing. I peek for a quick second, just kind of see the campers' reactions, and I get a little bit relieved just because I see a few of them are actually rolling their eyes. At this point, they seem really fed up with this person's behavior. The slight relief that I had disappears immediately when I look back at it, because it abruptly stopped screaming. I could tell it didn't. It's almost like it couldn't. It understood that it wasn't working. Whatever it was trying to do wasn't working. And its chin tucks in a little bit and starts looking at me at the top of its eyes, as if it's honing in on me. And the adrenaline in my chest starts pumping, because I don't know what this thing's going to run away or attack. It almost looked a bit happy about how scared I was. He gave a little bit of a smirk and replied, "Are you good?" in my voice, with its mouth closed, exactly how I had just said it to them. It did it as if it was threatening me. If I get in the way of her leaving with Nick, it could mimic me and leave with Sam. That moment felt like it lasted forever. Finally, I felt somebody grab my shoulder. I look back at it. It's the ranger. He has this confidence in his face that he's about to just handle the situation, which makes me feel a lot safer. He loudly says, "Don't let this thing intimidate you. It could only take your form if it could put you in a trance. And the only way it could put you in a trance is if you're inebriated. You didn't drink anything tonight, right?" I just nod my head. No, then you're good. And he looks at her and just says, "Go to sleep. Your husband's going to be here in the morning," and brushes her off. Her eyes light up as if she likes what he just said, and she almost scurries back into her tent. And as we're walking away, I hear her repeating to herself almost joyfully, "My husband is going to be here in the morning. My husband's going to be here in the morning." We start walking away, and I see Sam walking up with the plates of food. The look on his face was like, "Hey, what happened?" The ranger tells me and Sam to come eat dinner with him, that we deserve a little bit of an explanation. While we're walking, where we usually eat dinner a little bit away from the campers, I see Nick in between two camp guys, and he's safe, so I'm a little bit more relaxed at this point, and the questions start flowing in my head that I'm about to ask this guy, because I've got thousands of them.
When we sit down, the first question that comes to my head is, "So you know what that thing is, then?" Ranger says, "Kinda. All the other rangers call it a mimic. I've heard plenty of stories about them. I've only had one other personal experience with it. My working theory is that interacting with the stairs almost calls to them. Whenever the stairs are involved, it feels like it attracts everything. We're very fortunate that we had a lucky draw with the mimic, because it could have been something so much worse. I immediately think, if we're lucky with this thing, what else is in this park?" The ranger just keeps going on with the story. "So what we do know is these things target people that are under the influence of something. The last time I had to deal with it, it tricked this hippie guy that came here by himself. He was an easy target, and I was the one that saw him walk into the forest with it. I thought about chasing them and intervening, but once they hit the tree line, it's almost like they dissolved into the woods. I think to myself, that's exactly what Nick told me. So this ranger is definitely onto something. The ranger goes on and says when the hippie wandered back into the camp, he knew it definitely wasn't him, because he was talking really formal, and this guy was the opposite of formal. Everything he did was laid back, chill hippie vibe. We came back very eloquently, asking very specific questions in a monotone way. I knew something was wrong. Started walking around the camp, asking everybody who he came here with, and he was trying to figure out if he had any loved ones or family nearby. Before he got taken by this thing, he was very open with me and everybody else that he was a traveling nomad, and he had nobody really significant in his life in general. And when all the other campers started their hike back to the lodge, he wouldn't leave the campsite. And I told him I couldn't leave the campsite without everyone, and that he was my responsibility. He said he can't leave the campsite without somebody that loves him. He got really frantic and was pleading with me to call someone for him. I told him that he didn't put anybody on his emergency contact form. There was nobody to call. I remember seeing the defeat on his face. And the last thing it said to me as I ran out of time, and then he backpedaled towards the tree line. It was almost as if his face dissolved, and he shriveled up and became part of the forest. And 2 days later, we randomly found the hippie at the bottom of a pit about a mile off the campsite. The autopsy said died of starvation 2 days earlier. So it's my assumption that these things can't survive without living hosts. They trick you, then they trap you, then they mimic you, and they try to convince somebody to take them home. Seems like they can't leave the park unless somebody that loves them escorts them out. The way she's been acting almost confirms that with me, because it seems like she's been abiding by the same rules. But if we let this thing out and it gets to a city or a town, we have no idea how much damage this thing could do. I cut him off and asked him, how are we going to get the husband to leave this lady? He confidently says, let me handle that. We just need to focus on getting Nick to the lodge and trapping that thing here so we can focus on finding the real her while she's still alive. Sam stands up, says we're going to extract Nick at 0600, make the handoff with the father, and we orchestrate a grid-style search party starting east of the campsite when Nick leaves. That gives us approximately 10 hours of search time before the sun goes down. Sam kind of flipped the switch and started taking control of the situation because at his core, he's a tactical-minded, well-trained Army Ranger. He was an Army Ranger for about 10 years. The park ranger says, we're coming up on day 3. If we don't find her tomorrow, we might not find her alive. He dismisses us and tells us to get some rest, so me and Sam just clear our plates really quick to get some calories. Then we hustle back to our tents so we can get as much sleep as possible before the morning search. But once we get back to the tent, I'm just lying there with my eyes open. I'm having a really tough time sleeping. I just keep thinking about her repeating with my voice. I just can't get that image out of my head, hearing my own voice being spoken to me. I can't express to you how eerie it is to hear your own voice when it's not coming from a recording. And Sam knew exactly what I was thinking. He just blurted out, porcupine. I said, what? That's our code word, porcupine. If at any point we get split up or something crazy happens, you just ask me what the code word is, so you know it's me. I have a plan set to be able to recognize each other gives me just enough relief to fall asleep, but it sure did not stop me from having nightmares all night.
Wow, that's creepy as hell. It sounds like, though, that they finally feel as if they have the situation under control, and they have a plan in place.
Yes, this thing needs to be taken home by someone that loves it. That's what the creature's plan is.
So they're trying to find what they believe is like the host body, right? They're trying to find the actual mother.
Yes, while it's still alive.
And in order to do that, they had to continue to keep these two apart because in the morning, the next part I'm about to get into, the father is coming. And when the father gets there, They got to get back to the lodge. They got to get the kid with the father and get him out of here so he's out of danger. And at that point in time, the thing is going to really struggle to leave these woods without being able to attach itself to a loved one. So their plan in place. They are going to get up in the morning first thing, get that kid across the forest to the campground, through the forest to the lodge, get him with his dad, and then they have to go find the real mother in the woods, and then to go from there. They did establish a safety word. They said, hey, if something happens to us tomorrow, if we get split up, the safety word is porcupine. The reason they established the safety word is, like I said, because this thing's a mimic, right? They don't know when it somehow became the host of your body, your mind. So they have a plan in place, at least here.
It doesn't even need to look like you to sound like you. It could look like someone else and still sound like you. So it's like extra scary because it could be anywhere.
Yeah, it's so freaky when it repeated his voice. I mean, what he said in his exact voice, that's absolutely insane. I don't know. All right, I'm going to start the story back up in the next morning. I abruptly woke up the next morning, right as the sun was coming up, and I saw Sam was already getting ready. So I jumped up to catch up because every moment that we're still here, the woman is still out there in the woods suffering. I get ready, like I'm late for the first day of school. Ranger's already at the edge of the campsite with appears to be groggy, tired Nick. All of us climb into one of those off-roading golf carts. Thank God we had a vehicle because I was not looking forward to a 15-mile hike there and back, and then joining a search party. Me and Sam jog up, and we just hop to the back seat quietly because we're trying to execute this mission and get this over with. When the Ranger turns on the engine, we hear a zip come from a tent. The zipper is being opened, and it comes storming out of her tent towards our cart. We start driving away, and it's a little downhill as we descend. So once we're about 30 feet away, you can't see over the ridge there anymore. But you could see her storming up to the edge of the trail and just stand there. This woman looked very angry that we lied to her. She stands dead center of the trail for about 5 seconds, then she just turns and sprints into the tree line. Sam sees it and asks, "Where do you think she went?" The Ranger cuts us off and says, "Keep your head on a swivel, she's getting desperate." We're driving for about 10 minutes and the trail continues to get more and more narrow as we go. It's about a 5-mile stretch where the trees are just about 3 feet away from each side of the cart. And for the next 5 miles, we find out exactly where she went. She was periodically popping out of the tree line screaming things at Nick. "Mommy loves you. Take Mommy home. Where's your father?" She just continued to scream and cry, "Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me." She never made an attempt on the vehicle. It just seemed like she was tracking us and following us and continuing to try and manipulate Nick. But let me tell you, it never got less creepy that she was always ahead of us. And finally we get to the lodge and we see the father out front standing outside of his truck, looking pretty confused and frustrated. We tactically pull up next to the truck, planning to get Nick into his vehicle as soon as possible and as quickly to get him out of there. But the second we stop, Nick jumps out of the vehicle and runs to his dad crying, saying, "I want to go home." His dad gives him a quick pat on the back and says, "Don't worry, I'm taking you home. Wait in the car. I have to talk to these guys real quick." We walk up and he walks up to us, we're walking up to him and he says to us, and he seems very frustrated when he asks this, "Are you guys going to tell me why I had to rush here first thing in the morning? I have no idea what we're going to tell this guy, but we need to get him out of here as quick as possible." The Ranger steps up and quickly replies that every child on this campsite needs to be here with a responsible adult. As the father's asking where the mother is, she pops up out of the woods, completely out of nowhere. She is hauling it towards us, announcing to everybody, the whole crowd there, "Finally, my husband is here. Finally, my husband is here." She's walking up to him, starting to approach him, kind of like maybe like she's looking for a hug or looking to be embraced. He puts his hand up and he starts backing up towards his truck and he says, "I cannot believe you right now." She just kind of says in a sad voice, "I just want my husband to take me home." He cuts her off immediately, talks over her and he says, "Kristen, don't play that shit. We've been divorced for over a year." He starts scanning her. He's looking her up and down and with a look of disgust on his face. And I take a look at her. She's looking really drawn out, sleep deprived and exhausted. In that moment, I can't help but wonder if she's a mirror of the real Kristen. But the father cuts off my train of thought and says, "You promised me you were done drinking, and I gave you 1 week alone with him, and you can't keep yourself together." She gets out a little whimper and says, "Can you please just take me home?" And he says, "Absolutely not. Pull yourself together and take yourself home." He then storms to his vehicle and drives off. I'm thinking, wow, I can't believe he just did our job for us. For a brief second, it felt like we won, like a victory. This is until she takes off sprinting back into the trees. The three of us look at each other and we all have an understanding what is happening. She's trying to beat us back to the camp so she can switch into somebody else before we get there. That moment of relief immediately turned into the most bumpy, chaotic off-roading experience of my life, because we have no idea how long it's going to take her to get back, but we know at even our top speed it's going to take us several minutes. The ride back was far too loud for any of us to talk and have any sort of type of conversation, so I'm just in my head thinking, what are we going to do with her when we have to go search for the real Kristen? What's the point in finding her if we come back and it's found a new host already, and we're going to have to go through the same process all over again? When we pull up to the campsite, I was damn near expecting this thing to be dragging somebody else into the woods with how desperate it looked when it darted towards the tree line into the woods before we left the area. To our surprise, the campsite is completely vacant. Sam just blurts out, "Where is everybody?" The ranger tells us that he had the camp guides take everybody onto the pontoons for a fishing day. So nobody was at the campsite for her to prey on while we were gone. But they might get back before we find the real Kristen, so we have to make this thing come with us by any means necessary. We hop off the golf cart. We are walking with purpose now towards the campsite, assuming that she's hiding somewhere. But she's just sitting in the middle of the campsite on a log by the bonfire, rocking back and forwards. I see something on the log next to her. As we get closer, I realize that I'm seeing 3 crows sitting on the log next to her. They're just standing there, perfectly perched up on this log with the exact same spacing between them, as if they're in a forming something. As we're walking up, I'm mentally preparing to have to fight this thing and drag it into the forest with us to search for the real Kristen. I could tell by the way everybody was walking up that nobody has any idea how this interaction's going to go. Assuming she's going to be violent, that's all we could assume. But I know that I'm prepared to do whatever I have to do to save the real Kristen. I know they are too. The park ranger sternly says to it, "You're coming with us right now." She just keeps rocking and mumbling. She's mumbling this. "Do you know what the crows are? Do you know about the crows?" He cuts her off immediately. He says, "You're coming in the forest with us right now to find that woman." It looks up at us, almost excited with real optimistic look on its face. It's really delicately standing up and starts walking towards the tree line and says, "I'd love to go in the forest with you."
Sam immediately takes charge and says, "Let's do a triangle formation." Sam points to the ranger and says, "You're at the front, and me and Doug will be on either side of her. Doug will scan the right, I'll scan the left, and she'll stay in the middle of all of us, so she can't get away from us." Me and the ranger are both not sure about this. The mimic seems okay with this idea and just takes her place in the middle of the formation. It makes me very uncomfortable with how willingly she wants to do this. But we don't have a choice at this point, and we need to just go. We started to go into the tree line. I'm trying to do my job and just keep scanning the right for clues, or, where we can find Kristen. But I can't help but keep checking on her to make sure it's not getting any crazy ideas. But we're walking about 3 minutes when I peek back, and there's something different about it. I take a better look at her, and her face looks full and vibrant. The bags under her eyes are gone, her posture perfect. She's almost giving off an aura eerily similar to the glow of the stairs. The forest is super dense, and there's not a lot of sunlight that gets through the trees. Sam and the ranger look completely shaded, but she looks like the sunlight is hitting her. This makes me internally panic because I already didn't like how happy she was to come in here. I really don't like that once we're in here, she seems to be thriving. I look away from her just to start looking for more clues. As we keep hiking, everything in the forest starts looking the same. I start to feel a little disoriented and dizzy, but I just focus on the trees. Before I know it, I feel like a lot of time has passed. I'm out of touch with the situation. It feels like I'm in an infinite loop of paranoia, and I realize I haven't checked on her or anybody else in the group for what feels like hours. So when I finally pull myself together, away from the haze, I pan back to the group, and the park ranger is standing where she was, in between me and Sam, and she's at the front of the group. Me, Sam, and the ranger are just standing single file behind her. I have no idea when that switch happened. I can tell that Sam and the ranger haven't realized the switch happened yet. I'm not even looking for clues at this point. I'm just disoriented and confused, barely remembering why we're even out here until the park ranger shakes his head really hard, like he's shaking the trance off, and blurts out, "Stop." He slaps me and Sam on the chest, stop us from walking. This is the first time I've seen real panic in the ranger's eyes. He starts questioning me and Sam if we have any idea how long we've been out here or what direction we went. We all frantically check our watches and phones, but none of them seem to be working. She had stopped walking about 10 feet ahead of us and just turned around and calmly looking at us. The ranger storms up and yells, "Where'd you take us?" Aggressive, borderline violent. She just gently replies, "I took you where we were meant to go, silly." She just lightly lifts her hands and points to her right. We all turn our gaze and see this massive hollowed-out tree with a big oval gap in the front of it, with glass stairs spiraling around the outside of it. They were like the stairs that you would see in the loft, but they were sticking out of the bark of the tree, and I realized that the real Kristen is sitting in a fetal position, completely motionless inside the oval gap. We're just standing there in disbelief for a moment, and questions start flooding my brain. Why would this thing take us directly to Kristen? Is it surrendering? Is it a trap? Was it planning to lead us here the whole time? I take a better look at the tree, and it's giving off the same illumination that her and the first staircase were giving off. I start to get those intrusive thoughts again. I feel oddly drawn to it, but I know better than to act on them because of what happened the first time. I look back at the other guys to see their reactions on their faces, but when I look at Sam, the mimic is right next to him with her hand on his shoulder, whispering in his ear. I didn't even see this thing walk up to him. I take a step towards them. Before I can get a word out, it whips its head towards me and says, "Porcupine." Sam's eyes are completely glazed over. He's just staring at the tree, motionless. She takes a slight pause, tilts her head, takes her hand off his shoulder, and he immediately starts sprinting towards the tree. He gets a little bit of a head start on me, but I start chasing him right away because I could tell something is off as we're getting closer to the tree. I can tell he's not sprinting towards Kristen. He's sprinting towards stairs. The direction he's sprinting is like 5 degrees off from the oval gap, but I close in on him, and I get one hand on his back. I'm slowing him down, but I can't stop him from getting to the second step of the stairs. And once he touched it, it felt like the stairs gave off a vibrating pulse with each step. It was almost like somebody banging on a drum. I get my second hand on him and rip him off the stairs. I get him to the ground, and I have to restrain him with all my strength because he is trying as hard as he can to get back at these stairs. Sam is not small or feeble by any means, and I have to use all my strength to restrain him. But he's not fighting me. He's not hitting me. He's not pushing me. He's not even looking at me. His eyes are fixated on the stairs, and he's just clawing to get back to them. It gets to the point where I don't even think I could restrain him any longer until he suddenly stops and goes limp. His eyes revert back to normal, and he just looks at me and goes, "What happened?" He seems okay, so I look to see what stopped him, and I see the ranger pulling Kristen out of the tree. It seems like the moment he pulled her out, he stopped. Me and the ranger look at each other as if to say, "What now?" We all look back towards the mimic, and this thing had a satisfied, devious look on its face. That was until its face started to fade away to nothing, And just like the ranger explained with the hippie, it starts to evaporate. And once it completely disappears, I look back to Sam to see if he's okay. And he gives me the nod that it's all good.
This is messed up. This is creepy as hell. So this mimic of Kristen, with the missing person that they're looking for at this point in time now, got the son out of the park safely. This thing leads them to her, but before doing that, they're all walking along, and they somehow get in this trance and the person sharing the story says he's just looking for clues. Then he looks back in the strategic position they were all walking in, with him to the left, his friend to the right, and the park ranger leading the pack with it, as we're calling it, the mimic in the middle. All of a sudden, when he looks back in this trance, everything's changed. The lineup's changed. The way they're walking's changed. It was as if she was leading them where to go now.
Yeah, she was in the front now, and the ranger was in the center, and they were all following her for an unknown amount of time. And it seems like the ranger finally, who this time is just falling behind, right? They're all just following her now. He snaps out of this trance and he says, like, stop. Taps the other guys on the back or chest or what it said to kind of get them out of their trance. And
yeah, you get the feeling that he was just desperate to get them out of that trance. He said it slaps them on the chest. Like, you can imagine the feeling of like his desperation at this point. Like, he doesn't know how long they've been walking like this, and he knows something bad happened. This thing was suddenly leading them. I could feel, like, when he described it, I could almost feel the force of, like, that bam, just slapping them across the chest to, like, knock them, their senses back in. Yeah, that was a very spooky part of the story, is this whole part there.
But all along, she actually led them to the real person, who was sitting in a walled out area of a tree with a new set of stairs right by her. So they all start heading towards her. They don't know. He doesn't know if him and his friend are heading towards her or the stairs. He knows he's feeling the urge to go to the stairs, but he's not going to do that this time. His friend takes off running onto the stairs, and he has to yank him off. Really an identical situation to what happened with him earlier, except for I think his friend made it up an extra step. And then he's basically holding his friend down. His friend's going nuts, wants to get right back up, has to get on them stairs in the woods. And all of a sudden, he just stops fighting it, stops fighting that urge. And as soon as he stops, he looks over and he happens to see that's the exact same time where the park ranger is pulling the real Kristen out of the tree. And then this thing, just like the park ranger said, happened with the hippie earlier that went missing, and which is, the next day they found the dead body of the hippie, and they said it was 2 days later, which is creepy enough as it is. But yeah, it just evaporates into the woods.
Yeah, and just kind of go back about the hole in the tree. You've heard stories of mimics or changelings. They're always, there's some kind of hole in the tree kind of connection to their beginning, their origin, or their birth. Yeah, so just to see that kind of pop up again, I was like, yeah, unsettling.
And I think that the troubling part is, even though the park rangers basically predicted like how this could play out, he still is powerless.
Right.
And became victim to the trance. And let's not forget about the creepiest thing about the trance. That is when Sam realized they're in the trance, he started walking towards his friend because he saw this mimic talking in his friend's shoulder. I said Sam, right? I meant it wrong. His friend Sam's shoulder.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like had a hand on the shoulder, right? And talking, like whispering into Sam's ear. And before he could get close enough, the thing just whips its head around at him and says the safe word that they established the night before. Porcupine, right? They're laying in the tent at night, and they said porcupine is our safe word. If anything happens, if we're split apart, anything weird happens at all, we will know if each other's okay if the word porcupine is said. And that's what the mimic just said to him.
Right.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I wonder, was this, was it able to read its mind, or was the, mimic listening to them the night before, like nearby? Yeah, it's either way.
The creepiest part might be that the mimic seems happy, like it just accomplished something.
Yes, the devious smile that they described there.
Jesus. Are you ready to pull this back up, Luke? They just found the real person here, and the mimics vanished off into the woods, evaporated, I think is what was said.
Yep. So we immediately start putting all of our attention towards Kristen and huddle around her, and the ranger's giving her water. We're so relieved when she starts slowly regaining consciousness. It takes about a full minute for her to start making sounds of her eyes starting to open. When she looks coherent enough, the ranger asks if she's okay, and she just says, "What took you guys so long? It's been days." The ranger follows up and asks her if she remembers anything. She barely gets out. "It told me you'd come, told me I'd be safe by the stairs." I didn't realize why that rubbed me the wrong way until Sam whispered to me, "That's exactly what the mimic said when we first found it." This realization to me was absolutely world-shattering because I realized that we didn't win. It's like the mimic knew we were going to find her like this and was mocking us from the beginning. Then even more questions started flooding my mind. Did it not want to get out of the park? What's its motive? Just to get us back to the stairs? Why does this thing look so deviously satisfied? We're tending to Kristen while I'm internally turning these questions over in my head. She's severely dehydrated and starving, so I really don't have time to think. We just have her slowly rehydrating from the ranger's canteen and nibbling on protein bars from Sam's pack. I want to leave so bad, but we have to wait till she's strong enough to walk herself. The forest is way too dense for us to carry her, so we just assist her about 30 feet away from the stairs because it doesn't feel right just hanging out right next to them. We have to wait there for about a half hour. The part of me is very curious to see if the stairs disappear or transform in any way. We don't start questioning Kristen immediately because we want her to just focus on getting better. We all just focus on being as gentle and consoling as we possibly can. I could tell we all don't want her to see how shaken up we are because we just want her to feel safe. Once she seems calm and content enough, we all kind of huddle up to start our game plan. Our phones are working out, and even though the data is kind of spotty, we can see that we're only a mile away from the camp. Once I let them know how close we are, I could see it in their face that we had the exact same experience. Because they're as surprised as I am, because I felt like whatever the mimic did to us went on for hours. Before we could start talking and get into detail about any of our experiences, Kristen speaks up. Of course, she asks to see if Nick is safe and okay at this point. She's standing up and seems okay to start walking, so we walk over to her and ensure that Nick is safe with his father. We calmly explain to her that we didn't feel safe having Nick at the campsite while we were looking for her, just in case he tried to run off and look for her himself. She had a little bit of a shame in her face. She nodded and accepted that as a pretty reasonable explanation. The ranger asked if she's okay to start walking back to camp, and she nodded obediently. So we gathered all of our stuff and start walking for about 20 feet before the most putrid, rotten smell hits my nose. I know we all smell it at once based on everybody's body language. I immediately whip my head around to see if the source is the stairs, and of course, the stairs are nowhere to be found. And the ranger looks at us and says, "We need to leave right now." We all feel guilty rushing Kristen. And after all she's been through, but it's clear that Ranger feels like we need to leave the area with a sense of urgency. So we really start picking up the pace. But it feels like the smell is following. It smells like a mix of sour sewage, rotten meat, and sulfur. After 5 straight minutes of it not losing any intensity, I ask, "What is that smell?" Sam replies quietly, because I don't think he wants Kristen to hear. "It's a carcass." Says with a certainty that I know is from experience. I whisper back, "One of their carcasses?" Ranger cuts me off and says, "It's carcass." But he says it in a way that Kristen wouldn't be able to tell what he actually meant. But me and Sam knew what he was implying. And the look on his face was also implying that we should be quiet. He finished our whispering conversation by saying, "If you see antlers, keep your head down, keep walking." I know I can't reply verbally, but internally, I was cynically joking to myself, great. I don't just worry about magical stairs and the faceless mimic, but now I have to worry about a territorial stinky elk. I momentarily forgot that the most dangerous thing here is still Mother Nature, and the last thing we need is to be rushed by a 600-pound elk. We get through most of the hike back with zero complications, but we could see the start of the edge of the campsite through the trees. We're all about 100 yards away from the finish line when we hear an elk scream from behind us. If you've never heard an elk scream, it's horrifying and borderline human-like. I encourage you to look it up on YouTube. We start to pick up the speed a little bit until we're 20 feet away from the campsite. The elk lets out a second scream, but the tone changes a little bit, a half second into the scream, and it sounds like a young boy screaming, "Mom!" Kristen, panicky, whips her head around towards Ranger and says, "That was Nick. I thought you said my son was safe." Ranger grabs her both shoulders, not in an aggressive voice, but in a way that he's about to say she needs to listen. "I promise you that was not your son. Right now, we just need to get you to the lodge, and the second we get there, we'll call him. I promise." "Okay." And then to break the tension a little bit, he said with a smile, "I just found you. Please don't go running off in the woods again." This comforted Kristen enough to get her through the trees.
When we get out of the woods, it felt like I could finally breathe again. We were only in there for about 3 hours, but with everything that happened, I couldn't believe that it was just past noon. The campsite was still empty, but we needed to get Kristen into a vehicle and headed to the lodge before anybody came back, because it raised a lot of questions with other campers. Why is she still here? It was common knowledge that she was gonna leave that morning. We could tell she's peeking towards the campsite looking for her belongings, but the ranger gets ahead of it and he says, "Don't worry, your stuff left when Nick did." It was great, quick thinking by the ranger. "So now let's get you home," the ranger said. In my head, I'm considering asking her what she remembers. But during the 2-minute walk to the vehicle, I can tell that she's fully under the impression that she had a couple too many and got herself lost in the woods. I can see the embarrassment building on her face. Our current situation, that's kind of ideal, because we just need to get her out of here as soon as possible. She climbs into the vehicle, but before they drive off, the park ranger walkie-talkies the camp guides. He alerts them to bring the campers back to the campsite because there's an aggressive elk in the area, and he doesn't want them walking back after dark where they can't see one coming. And on the other end, one of the other camp guides replies, "Don't worry, we're already on our way back because an aggressive, quick, full cold front has moved through and nobody's dressed for it." I don't know what it was about the camp guide saying that, but it put a sense of urgency into the ranger as he starts to walk away to the vehicle, but shouts back to us before he gets in, "Boys, I'll get back as soon as I can. Stay away from the tree line, and if you smell it, hide." We nervously watch him drive off. It's only noon, and I'm absolutely exhausted. I catch myself just thinking about the devious look on the mimic's face before it disappeared and evaporated into nothing into the forest. It reminds me to check on my friend. This is the first time Sam and I have been able to have a minute to talk since everything that's gone down. So I just open up the conversation with, "Should we leave?" And Sam goes, "We can't. If it was just you that touched the stairs, I'd say let's go. But I cannot leave knowing that I might have just made everything worse when I stepped on the steps." Well, I was not surprised with that answer at all, because that's exactly what I was thinking earlier when everything happened to me. I tried to comfort him a little bit more. I even asked the question because it was the first thing that came to my mind. Pretty crazy how we were in that time loop back there. I don't really understand that. Sam looks at me funny and he says, "Time loop? Mine wasn't like that at all. Mine felt like sleep paralysis. I saw everything happening. I saw you losing it. I saw the ranger voluntarily switch spots with her, and I was trying to scream, but nothing would come out. And then she started talking to me, but not out loud. She was talking to me in my head. She just kept telling me that it was my turn to go up the steps and that we should really stop fighting it. And there was nothing that we could do. And she just kept asking me, do I know what the crows mean? And then I asked Sam, did she tell you what they meant? Like, what does she mean by that? Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about it this whole time. And Sam says no. She just kept taunting me with the question. about the crows. But she did say that we'll know what they mean when we get back to the camp. That was basically our cue to start walking back to the camp because we're both looking for answers. I kept the dialogue going, and I asked him if our experiences were so different. What do we think happened to the ranger? He jokingly replied, I'm sure it was something unique and horrible, but I'm more interested to see what he knows about the source of that smell. We walked quietly for a second, straight ahead towards the logs to sit down. We could see from a distance the crows were still perched exactly where they were, and we just sat on the log straight across from them. It's funny because we were so tired we didn't even have enough energy to be scared of the crows at this point in time. We were just sitting, having a standoff with these things. They're staring at us and we're staring at them. And then one, all the way to the left, the crow all the way to the left, just squawks out of nowhere and just flies off. We just look at each other and nod. It turns out the mimic was right. We knew exactly what they meant, the crows meant. Sam just casually says, 1 down, 2 to go. And then he follows up and kind of shamefully asks me, did I do what you did? He was implying, did he have a seizure as well? I said, no, it just seemed like you were really trying hard to get to the top of those stairs, rushing as fast as you could. But I stopped you before you could get there. He says, did you feel that vibrations? And I said, yeah, same thing happened when same thing happened when both of us stepped on them. He asked me, do you think there's a correlation between how many steps you go up and the severity of the consequences? I replied, I really hope not. And then, right then, we hear laughing and talking approaching us. It's the group of campers coming back from fishing. Luckily, the chatter sounds very nice and pleasant. So that gives us a little bit of relief because we know nothing bad happened to them while they were out. Me and Sam do our best to keep everything under control, obviously, so nobody else knew. We didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. Everybody else is unloading all their gear and gathering around for lunch. Once everybody's settled in, one of the camp guides starts going around and he's doing a head count. And he shouts, we're 1 short. Everybody look around. Who's missing? Everybody looks around for the immediate family or friends or loved ones. And then 2 guys speak up playfully. They're both in their early 30s, like real outdoor-looking types. They said, don't worry, guys. That's just our buddy Pete. Sam and I looked at each other in fear and couldn't help but assume that this was a result of the stairs in the woods being stepped on again. To be continued.
Oh, man. I got to know what happens next.
Yeah, there's a whole other part, man. We'll dive into that later. I mean, wow. What a cool story, though.
Yeah.
So when I sent this over to you guys, I sent it over in batches like, I'm going to read this part. Jack, you're going to read this part. Luke, you're going to read this part. Did you guys read the whole story, though?
I read, I was going to read it all, but then I thought to myself that I kind of wanted to experience it live. So I was like, I'm kind of spoiling it for myself. So I ended up not reading the whole thing in one sitting.
That was also my kind of feeling. I was like, I could get into my portion and I can experience that, but then I was like, I want to hear the experience of hearing the story from you guys when you do your guys' portions, and that way I can kind of get a feeling of how our listeners might feel as well. So I was just like in this mindset, like, you know what, I could read this whole thing, bash it out real fast, and then go from there. But then I was like, man, I wanted to see what it's like being on the other side of this, listening to it being read off by people. And so I was like excited to hear how you guys did your takes, because I knew how I was going to do mine. And so I was like, I want to hear how you guys do. And so I really enjoyed experiencing it with everybody else, except for the parts that were I had edited and did mine.
I knew it was going to be a little bit different because the last couple of weeks we've just been sharing a story, boom, table talk, right, afterwards. But I was curious, would they actually read the whole thing? Like, obviously I was so into this, I did. So I was kind of looking for your reactions as we went along. How did you guys feel about, we'll get back to the story in a second. How did you feel about the change in pace this week? Obviously, it's not something I think we could do every week, but.
Well, I really enjoyed it. It really felt like we were kind of like weaving the story together while we were reading it.
Yeah. I felt like we were in school, like taking turns reading, but we were actually paying attention.
Right, yeah.
I was going to say a slightly more ancient form of that. It would be like a Viking skalds would take turns telling a ghost story, And since this is a very druidic story as it is, with the mimics and the crows, which kind of remind me of Odin's ravens in a way, I was thinking more like that, but similar.
That's the exact same thing I was thinking, Luke. That's the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's what
Pilgrims and the Vikings and all that stuff.
Vikings, whatever.
What do you guys think about this story, though? It was so last week we talked about the stairs in the woods, and then I was able to find this.
I really love this. I always enjoy stories that involve going into the woods. I've always liked going into the woods as a kid, not at night. That's where I drew the line.
Not searching for missing people.
No. But I would, go on trails, go on hikes and things like that, and you just stare off out there, and you're just like, what kind of things are going on out here when no one's watching? It's just the animals and just stuff like that. So I've always enjoyed woods and wood-based stories, I guess.
I've always been a big fan of creatures too, like things that someone might have conjured in some past life, some sort of weird thing that shouldn't be here. And so, like, this idea of something coming into our world or being attracted to someone because they interact with something from their world, that kind of story always is like the perfect type of like story for me. Like, like it gives you a little bit of a chill, but it's also like, it kind of harkens back to old religions and stuff about, their, ritualistic offerings or something, just some sort of dark creature in the woods. So I've always liked stories like that in general. So this has been absolutely awesome to listen to and to talk about.
People commenting, Jesus, that's terrifying. Crazy story. Some people like the change up. Seems more than not. One person thought they like kind of us. I think it's hard to pay attention that long. But the good thing about this is you can always come back and listen to it later. But we do appreciate everybody listening to it live, though, for sure. I thought this was a good follow-up to what Jack teased last week, though.
Yeah.
You need to know what happened when you touch the stairs in the woods. This story is a little bit everywhere. I got a lot of controversy around it. I will say one thing. It's a great story. I mean, wow, how creative.
Is there another part to this? Like, this?
I cut it off because I knew it would be past our time.
Well, I definitely want the rest of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's more. There's basically a second half. There's about the same amount left. Again, length.
Yeah, I would like to revisit it for sure and get the ending, get the final bits of the story.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's what happens when you step on the stairs in the woods. So
yeah, don't do it.
Just say the fuck off them.
I know we're just talking here. People are commenting along. That's fine. We're just wrapping things up. The mimic character, Luke. Jack, we'll let Luke go first, but what did you think about the mimic character?
Mimics are a very interesting creature in different lore and like stories. There's always different like shapeshifters or something that like takes on the form of someone that gets lost or they deliberately abduct people. I like those stories a lot. Jack actually mentioned something about the tree with the oval opening in it. That does come up in a lot of them also. And so there must be, some sort of connection to it, or ancient story of some sort. I find them to be absolutely terrifying because the worst thing I can imagine is something looking exactly right, but being wrong. Actually, what's his name? Stephen King said that the most terrifying thing he could think of would be to walk into his house and find everything replaced with the exact copy of itself. And so that's kind of like the feeling you get from a mimic.
Yeah, kind of like to go on from that, the mimics and so, I guess sometimes they're called changelings or even sci-fi stories, I guess.
What's the other thing they're called?
People.
There's something opera, or what the heck is that word?
Oh yeah,
doppelganger. What was it?
Doppelganger.
Doppelganger. That's it.
Yeah. And it's just like this, this idea that someone you knew is not that person, and it just is pretending to be that person. Like I said, in like sci-fi movies, they had like the pod people. It was like just a fake. And you're just like, what happened to the real person? What happened to the person I knew? And just seeing this person or thing pretend to be a person is very unsettling. It's unsettling on every angle. And yeah, for sure, stories of mimics or changelings or doppelgangers that you can't help but be incredibly fascinated by them.
UFOs are talked about more mainstream these days. And it kind of brings me back to that when I'm thinking that there's a whole huge forest, there's a whole ocean, there's a whole whatever it may be that we don't really inhabit, so we don't really understand. Maybe we don't really understand where we're at now, but to think about what's in the woods that you don't know, the things you don't know about, is terrifying. And I think for me, when the comment was made that the ranger said they were almost lucky that this was the mimic they were dealing with.
Yeah, and he mentions at the end of this segment of the story where there's the elk, and there's the what's going on with the crows, what's going on with this like carcass like smell that there's what else is going to
If you smell it, hide.
right, exactly. And also a lot of times people say like we're humans, we're the king of the planet or whatever, but yet we stay out of the woods. We stay off the mountaintops. We stay out of the bottom of the ocean. We stay far away from all of these locations that make up most of the planet. And you wonder to some degree, it's like, well, yeah, obviously it's logical, but maybe there's also more reasons than we can fully understand of why we've always done that. We've always stayed out of those areas. We live where we live, and whatever else is out there lives where that's out there.
Guys, it's been another fun episode.
Yes, it has.
Feel exhausted from all the reading, though. Yeah, there were some long stretches there. I tried to split it up evenly.
Right.
I gave myself the worst, but
there was a part where they said they were exhausted and it's only noon. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I kind of feel this exhaustion just from the, through the story. You can kind of feel like their exertion they're going through.
Yeah, I agree. Well, yeah. So everybody listening live and those of you listening later, we do this live every Monday at 10:30 p.m. If Luke's not walking his cat at that time.
He's a big dog. Yeah.
We'll do this every week, unless holiday or something coming up. It was another fun week, though. I'm excited about what the future brings. You want to get us some stories? I think this streamed to the Facebook. I finally got that set up. So look for Your Scary Stories on Facebook. It's also on Twitter. You can also, I'll let you plug the Discord and all that other shit, Luke, because I don't know. But it's also, you can look up my profiles on Everything's Podcast Father. It's also there. Luke, you have a couple of communities that you set up.
Yes, we have a Discord, which is Your Scary Stories Discord. I need to put that link on our Facebook. I haven't done that yet. We also have a Reddit page, subreddit called Share Your Scary Stories. And you can catch me on there on Discord or Reddit as John Daly Programmer. I handle most of that stuff.
We're still setting up yourscarystories.com. You can go submit there, or you can contact us wherever we just told you. Guys, I'm going to hit this outro. We're going to be done with it. What do you think?
Yeah, we'll see you next time.